The harbor at Cherbourg stank of diesel fuel and death. June 1944. 3 weeks after D-Day, and the port that should have been pumping supplies to the Allied advance sat silent, choked by an invisible enemy. Beneath the dark green water, German Kriegsmarine engineers had spent months laying a mathematical nightmare. Over 300 sea mines in overlapping fields, each one a cast-iron sphere packed with 400 pounds of hexanite explosive. Touch one, and the pressure wave alone could rupture a man's organs from 30 yards away. Lieutenant Commander James "Jimmy" Hartwell stood on the concrete pier, staring at the water like it had personally insulted him. At 32, he was too old to be doing this work and too stubborn to stop. His hands, scarred from 100 close calls, gripped a battered clipboard. Behind him, a mixed unit of U.S. Navy divers and British bomb disposal experts waited in uncomfortable silence. 7 ships, Hartwell said, not turning around. 7 ships we've lost trying to sweep this harbor. 14 men dead. And we're not one goddamn inch closer to getting supply vessels through. Petty Officer Second Class Marcus Webb shifted his weight. The young black diver from Philadelphia had survived Omaha Beach only to volunteer for this, a job most sailors considered suicide with extra steps. Sir, with respect, the magnetic sweeps aren't working. These mines are too deep, and the Germans knew exactly what they were doing when they planted them. I'm aware, Webb. Then what's the play? Hartwell finally turned. His face was sunburned, unshaven, exhausted. The play is we go down there ourselves. No more sweeps. No more remote detonations. We find every single mine, and we disarm them by hand. The pier went silent except for the slap of water against concrete. British Sub-Lieutenant Colin Reeves, a Cambridge man who'd spent 2 years defusing Luftwaffe bombs in London, let out a low whistle. That's 300 mines, Commander. Even if we work 12-hour shifts, even if nobody makes a mistake, and somebody always makes a mistake, we're looking at months of work. And the generals won't wait months. Then we work faster. You can't rush bomb disposal, sir. That's how you die. Hartwell's jaw tightened. You know what else makes you die? Sitting here with our thumbs up our asses while Patton runs out of ammunition 50 miles inland. We need this port operational in 3 weeks, or the entire offensive stalls. He pulled a rolled-up diagram from under his arm and spread it across a supply crate. It showed the harbor floor in meticulous detail, depth contours, wreck locations, and red circles marking known mine positions based on aerial reconnaissance and German documents captured at the peninsula. Standard protocol won't work, Hartwell continued. These mines are contact and pressure sensitive. The fuses are set to detonate if tampered with incorrectly. We can't just cut wires and hope for the best. So what do we do? Webb asked. Hartwell tapped the diagram. We had a breakthrough yesterday. Engineers back in Portsmouth analyzed a recovered mine casing. These German TYPB models have a secondary safety mechanism, a magnetic tumbler lock inside the pressure housing. It was designed so that German minesweepers could theoretically disarm them without divers, using a coded magnetic pulse sequence. Reeves leaned in. Morse code. Close enough. It's a pattern. 3 short pulses, 2 long, 1 short, like tapping out a message. If you get the sequence right, the tumbler disengages and the mine goes inert. Get it wrong. He didn't finish the sentence. Jesus Christ, someone muttered. The problem, Hartwell said, is that you need to transmit the code underwater, directly against the mine casing, with enough magnetic field strength to trigger the mechanism but not enough to accidentally trip the contact sensors. It's a razor's edge. Webb frowned. Sir, we don't have equipment that precise. No. But we have these. Hartwell reached into a canvas bag and pulled out what looked like a modified solenoid coil wrapped in rubber, connected to a waterproof battery pack. The whole assembly was roughly the size of a brick. modified signal lamp batteries and rewound transformer coils from a crashed B-17, he said. The boys in the workshop put these together last night. In theory, if you press this against the mine housing and tap this button in the right pattern, you can send the magnetic pull sequence through the metal. The mine thinks it's being deactivated by German equipment, and the tumbler releases. In theory, Reeves repeated. In theory. The divers stared at the crude device. It looked like something a high school science class would reject. Who tests it first? Webb asked quietly. Hartwell met his eyes. I do, sir. I'm not asking you to do something I won't do myself. If this thing works, we can clear this harbor in days instead of months. If it doesn't work... He paused. Well, let's make sure it works. The water was 58 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to numb your face in minutes. Hartwell pulled on his Mark V deep-sea diving dress, the heavy canvas and rubber suit that made every movement feel like wading through concrete. The brass helmet came down over his head with a hollow clang, and suddenly the world became the sound of his own breathing and the tinny crackle of the communications line. "Comms check," Webb's voice crackled through the speaker. "Loud and clear," Hartwell replied. His voice sounded strange inside the helmet, distant and mechanical. "You don't have to do this first dive yourself, sir. We've been over this. At least let me. Webb, you're second in line. If this goes south, somebody needs to know what went wrong so they don't repeat it. That's you." A pause. "Understood, sir." The ladder down into the water was slick with algae. Hartwell's weighted boots found each rung carefully. The harbor water closed over his helmet, and the world became green silence. Bubbles from his exhaust valve rose past his faceplate like silver jellyfish. The visibility was maybe 15 feet. Murky. Particulate matter drifted in the beam of his chest-mounted lamp like underwater snow. Below him, shapes emerged from the gloom, the barnacle-crusted remains of a sunken barge, twisted metal, and there, 20 feet down, sitting on the muddy bottom like a malevolent egg, the first mine. It was bigger than he'd expected. 4 feet in diameter, covered in Hertz horns, those lead protrusions that looked like stubby fingers reaching out to touch anything that came close. Each horn contained a glass vial of electrolyte. Break the vial, complete the circuit, and 400 pounds of high explosive would turn you into red mist. Hartwell's heart hammered. His breathing fogged the faceplate. "Target acquired," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Beginning approach." "Copy that." "Take your time, sir." But time was exactly what they didn't have. Somewhere inland, soldiers were running out of bullets. Every hour this harbor stayed closed, more men died. Hartwell descended the final 10 feet, his boots stirring up silt as he touched down beside the mine. This close, he could see the German markings stenciled on the casing. TYPB, 1943, and a serial number. Manufactured in Kiel. Loaded onto a ship. Planted here by men who would never know if their work had killed anyone. He pulled the magnetic device from his belt. It felt absurdly light in the water, almost toy-like. His hands trembled, from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. "Positioning the device now," he said. "Confirmed. Sequence is 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. 3-2-1. 3-2-1. Got it." Hartwell pressed the rubber-coated coil against the mine casing, right above the central fuse assembly. The metal was rough with corrosion under his gloved fingers. He could feel his pulse in his temples, in his throat, in his fingertips. One mistake. One wrong pulse. One miscalculation in the workshop. He took a breath. The air tasted metallic. And then he pressed the button. The first pulse was a quick tap, click, felt more than heard, a brief thrumming vibration transmitted through his glove into the mine casing. Nothing exploded. Hartwell's lungs burned. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath. "First pulse complete," he said, voice tight. "Mine is stable." "Copy. Continue sequence." Second pulse. Click. Still stable. His fingers found the rhythm now, like tapping out a telegram he'd sent 1,000 times before. Third short pulse. Then he paused, the timing had to be exact, and delivered the first long pulse. Click. 2 full seconds, his thumb pressed down while his mind screamed that he was about to die. The mind sat there, inert, patient. Halfway through, Webb's voice came through, steady as a rock. The kid was good under pressure. "You're doing great, sir." The second long pulse. Click. Hartwell's breath fogged the faceplate so badly he could barely see. The lamp beam scattered through the murk, catching on particles suspended in the water. A small fish darted past, completely unconcerned with the explosive device that could vaporize them both. Final pulse. Short. Quick. Click. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Hartwell felt it, a subtle clunk transmitted through the mine casing. Mechanical. Precise. Deep inside the pressure housing, some German engineer's failsafe had just disengaged. The tumbler lock, releasing. "Jesus Christ," Hartwell whispered. "It worked." "Say again, sir?" "It worked." The tumbler released. "I felt it disengage." The communications line erupted with cheers, distorted and crackling but unmistakably jubilant. Webb was shouting something. Reeves was laughing. Someone was yelling for the engineers to get more devices built immediately. Hartwell stared at the mine. This thing that had terrified him 30 seconds ago was now just an inert lump of iron and explosive that would never hurt anyone. He reached out and touched one of the Hertz horns, carefully, not taking any chances, but there was no electricity, no hair-trigger sensitivity. "Dead metal." "Ascending," he said. "Let's get another diver down here to verify, then we'll mark this position and move to the next one." The climb back up the ladder felt like floating. When his helmet broke the surface, hands grabbed him and hauled him onto the pier. The moment they unscrewed the faceplate, he was hit with June air and the smell of salt and diesel and the sound of men celebrating like they'd just won a battle. Because they had. Webb grabbed his shoulders. "Sir, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You just made history." "We all did." Hartwell looked at the crude magnetic device, still dripping harbor water. "Get this to the engineers. Tell them we need 20 more by tomorrow morning. No, 30. We're going to work in teams, 2 divers per mine, 1 to place the device, 1 to observe and record. Reeves, I need you to draft safety protocols. Nobody goes down alone, and nobody rushes the sequence." "Understood. And somebody get me dry clothes and coffee. We've got 299 more of these bastards to deal with." By the 3rd day, they had a system. The divers worked in 4-hour shifts, descending in pairs with the magnetic devices, now dubbed Hartwell's hammers by the crew, a nickname Jimmy pretended to hate but secretly loved. Each mine took roughly 20 minutes to locate, approach, disarm, and mark with a float buoy. The water was cold and the work was exhausting, but the rhythm kept them sharp. Webb turned out to be a natural. The kid had steady hands and ice in his veins. By the afternoon of day 3, he'd personally disarmed 16 mines without a single misstep. Reeves, the British bomb disposal expert, brought a methodical precision that kept everyone from getting sloppy. He insisted on logging every mine, serial number, exact position, condition of the casing, anything unusual. "Details save lives," he'd say, scratching notes into a waterproof slate between dives. "Miss one detail, and somebody dies." But it was Petty Officer Vincent Calabrese who made the breakthrough that changed everything. Calabrese was a radio operator from Brooklyn who'd somehow ended up in the dive unit after his ship took a torpedo off Sicily. He had a gift for electronics, the kind of intuitive understanding that can't really be taught. On day 3, After watching diver after diver tap out the same magnetic pulse sequence, he had an idea. "Commander," he said, catching Hartwell between shifts, "what if we could automate this?" Hartwell was toweling off his hair, exhausted. "Automate what?" "The pulse sequence. Right now, every diver has to manually tap the button. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. And if they're nervous or cold or distracted, they might screw up the timing. But what if we built a circuit that delivers the exact sequence automatically? Just press one button, and the device does all 7 pulses with perfect timing." Hartwell stopped mid-towel. "Can you build that? Give me 6 hours and a soldering iron. You've got 3 hours and whatever equipment you need. Strip parts from anything that isn't nailed down." Calabrese grinned. "Yes, sir." He worked through the night in the converted workshop aboard the repair ship USS Amphion, surrounded by gutted radio sets and transformer coils. The circuit he designed was elegant in its simplicity: a mechanical relay timer salvaged from a bomb site, rewired to trigger the magnetic coils in the exact sequence needed. All a diver had to do was press a single button and hold the device against the mine casing. When Webb tested it on mine number 47 the next morning, the results were perfect. Single button press. 7 pulses in flawless sequence. Clunk. Disarmed. "Calabrese, you magnificent bastard," Webb said when he surfaced. "This just cut our time in half." Word spread. By the end of the week, they'd cleared 112 mines. By the end of the second week, 203. The automated devices let them work faster, safer, more efficiently. Divers who'd been terrified on day 1 were now descending with confidence, almost casual in their approach. But the sea is a jealous mistress, and she doesn't give up her dead easily. It happened on day 16. Petty Officer Second Class Roy Henderson was working the northwest quadrant of the harbor, an area where the Germans had planted mines in a particularly tight cluster. He was a good diver, careful, experienced, 31 years old with a wife and 2 kids back in Oregon. He'd disarmed 18 mines that week alone. Mine number 237 looked no different from any of the others. Standard TYPB configuration, resting on a slight incline on the harbor bottom. Henderson approached it exactly as he'd been trained, placed the automated device against the casing, and pressed the button. The first 3 short pulses fired correctly. But during the first long pulse, something inside the mine shifted. Later analysis would show that this particular mine had been damaged, either by the initial planting, by shifting currents, or by the concussion from a distant depth charge weeks earlier. The internal mechanism had corroded in an unusual way, creating a partial short circuit that the designers had never anticipated. When the 4th pulse hit, the electrical current didn't go where it was supposed to. Henderson had exactly 1 second to register that something was wrong, a high-pitched whine that he could hear even through the water and his helmet, before 400 pounds of hexanite explosive detonated 15 feet away. The shock wave hit him like a freight train. Above water, the harbor erupted. A column of white water shot 60 feet into the air, followed by a deep, rolling boom that rattled windows half a mile away. Gulls scattered into the sky, screaming. Pieces of metal rained down, splashing into the water in a deadly hail. "Man down!" someone screamed. "Henderson's down." Hartwell was suiting up in seconds, but Webb was faster. The kid was already in the water, descending through the roiling murk before anyone could stop him. The visibility was 0, just churning silt and debris. Webb's lamp beam cut through the chaos, searching. He found Henderson 30 feet from the detonation point. The blast had thrown him backward, slamming him into a piece of wreckage. His helmet was cracked, one of the glass viewing ports shattered. Blood clouded the water around him, a dark spreading stain that looked black in the lamplight. Webb grabbed him and started ascending, fighting against the weight of the suit and the current. "I've got him! I've got him! Pull us up!" Hands reached down, hauling them both onto the pier. They unscrewed Henderson's helmet with shaking fingers. His face was gray, blood running from his nose and ears, internal hemorrhaging from the pressure wave. His eyes were open but unfocused, breathing shallow and labored. "Medic!" Hartwell roared. "Medic now!" The corpsman worked on Henderson for 40 minutes. Tried everything. Chest compressions, oxygen, adrenaline. But the damage was too severe. Ruptured organs, collapsed lungs, internal bleeding that no amount of field medicine could stop. Roy Henderson died at 1,447 hours, 16 days into the operation, with his shipmates surrounding him and his commander holding his hand. Hartwell stood afterward, covered in another man's blood, staring at the harbor that had just claimed one of his divers. Around him, the crew had gone silent. The celebration, the confidence, the almost casual efficiency, all of it evaporated in an instant. Reeves approached quietly. "Commander, we need to suspend operations. The men need time to—" "No, sir, with respect, we're not stopping." Hartwell's voice was flat, dead. "Henderson knew the risks. We all know the risks. And if we stop now, he died for nothing. His family will get a hero's burial and a flag and a letter from me explaining that their husband and father gave his life clearing this harbor so that other men could live. That's the job. That's what we signed up for." Webb stepped forward. "Commander's right. Henderson would want us to finish." The other divers nodded slowly. Nobody wanted to quit. Nobody wanted to dishonor Henderson's sacrifice by walking away. But the easy confidence was gone now, replaced by something harder, grimmer. They'd been reminded of what they were really doing down there, dancing with death, one magnetic pulse at a time. Hartwell looked at the remaining float buoys marking uncleared mines. 63 left. "We go back to pairs," he said. "No one dives alone. We double-check every device before deployment. And we slow down. I don't care if it takes us 3 more weeks. We do this right." He met each man's eyes. Henderson was a good sailor and a good man. The best way to honor him is to make sure nobody else joins him. "Understood." "Yes, sir." "Then let's get back to work." The sun was setting over Cherbourg, painting the harbor water blood-red. Somewhere beneath that crimson surface, 63 mines waited in the dark, silent and patient. And the divers who had just learned the true cost of their innovation prepared to go back down. Dawn broke cold over Cherbourg on day 19, the harbor shrouded in a fog so thick you couldn't see the water from the pier. It felt appropriate, like the world itself had decided to mourn Henderson with them. Hartwell hadn't slept. He'd spent the night writing the letter to Henderson's widow, choosing and discarding words, trying to explain to a woman he'd never met why her husband had died disarming a bomb in a French harbor instead of coming home to Oregon. There were no good words for that. He'd sealed the envelope at 0400 and left it on the chaplain's desk. Now he stood at the pier's edge, staring into the fog. Behind him, the dive crew prepared for the day's work with mechanical efficiency. Reeves was checking airlines. Webb was testing communications equipment. Calabrese was calibrating the magnetic devices, making minute adjustments to ensure perfect timing. They'd cleared 41 mines since Henderson's death. 22 remained. "Sir," Webb said, approaching carefully. "Weather report says this fog is going to hang around most of the morning. Visibility topside is bad enough. It's going to be worse below." "We've worked in worse visibility." "Yes, sir. But the men are tired. 3 weeks of cold water dives, and we just lost." "I know what we lost, petty officer." Webb fell silent for a moment, then tried again. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted. You can't blame yourself for Henderson. That mine was damaged. There was no way to know it would fail like that. The automated sequence has worked on 236 other mines without incident. The odds don't mean shit when you're writing letters to widows." Hartwell's voice was harsh, then softened. "But you're right. We can't stop. So let's finish this." The fog began to burn off by 0900, revealing a harbor that had transformed over 3 weeks from a graveyard to something approaching functional. Ships could move through the cleared channels now. Supplies were starting to flow. Every mine they disarmed was another few yards of safe passage, another ton of ammunition reaching the front lines. The remaining 22 mines were clustered in the deepest part of the harbor, 60 to 70 feet down, where the water was colder and the pressure made your head feel like it was being squeezed in a vise. The Germans had saved the deepest field for last, knowing it would be the hardest to clear. Reeves volunteered for the first dive of the day. "I'll take Calabrese with me," he said, pulling on his diving dress. "We'll start with the southwestern cluster and work east." "Negative," Hartwell said. "I'm going with you." "Sir, you've logged more bottom time than anyone on this crew. You need rest. What I need is to finish this job." Hartwell reached for his own equipment. "You handle the device. I'll observe and record. By the book." They descended together into the green darkness, leaving the surface world behind. At 60 feet, the water pressed in with real weight, making every movement deliberate. The harbor floor here was different. No mud, just rock and gravel, with deeper trenches carved by tidal currents. Their lamps barely penetrated the gloom. The first mine sat at the bottom of a small depression, nestled against a boulder like some obscene egg in a stone nest. Reeves approached it with the careful precision of a surgeon, his movements economical and exact. Hartwell hung back, watching, his lamp adding to the illumination. Reeves placed the device, pressed the button. The 7 pulses fired in perfect sequence, 3 short, 2 long, 1 short, and the mechanical clunk of the tumbler disengaging was audible even through the water. "Mine 279 disarmed," Reeves reported. His voice through the comms was calm, professional. "Moving to next target." They worked through the morning, disarming mine after mine with mechanical efficiency. By noon, they'd cleared 6. By 1400, 11. The crew on the surface rotated through shifts, fresh divers descending, exhausted ones ascending, everyone moving with the practiced coordination of men who'd become very good at a very dangerous job. It was Webb and Seaman First Class Danny Ortiz who found the anomaly. They were working the eastern edge of the deep field when Webb spotted something that didn't match the pattern. Most of the mines were isolated, planted individually to maximize coverage. But here, sitting in a narrow trench, were 3 mines clustered together, close enough that you could touch all 3 at once. "Command, this is Webb. We've got something unusual down here." Hartwell, taking a break topside, grabbed the communications handset. "Describe it." 3 mines, sir. Planted in a tight triangle formation, maybe 6 feet apart. I've never seen a configuration like this. Reeves, who'd been studying captured German mine-laying manuals, swore quietly. "That's a chain configuration. It's designed so that if one detonates, the shock wave sets off the others. Creates a massive blast crater. They use it for harbor exits and critical choke points." "Can we disarm them individually?" Hartwell asked. "Theoretically, yes. But if the magnetic pulse from one device triggers a sympathetic resonance in the others." Reeves didn't finish the thought. "It's a risk. Everything down there is a risk." Webb's voice came through the speaker. "Sir, I can do this. If we work carefully, place the devices simultaneously on all 3 mines, and trigger them in sequence starting from the outermost and working inward, we should be able to avoid any sympathetic detonation. That requires 3 divers working in perfect coordination in the same confined space," Hartwell said. "You'd be on top of each other down there." "Yes, sir. But it's the only way to clear this field. These mines are blocking the deepest channel, the only one that can handle large cargo ships. We don't clear these, the harbor stays half functional." Hartwell looked at Reeves, who gave a slow nod. "He's right. And Webb's the best diver we have." The decision took 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. "All right. Webb, Ortiz, and Calabrese, you're the three-man team. Calabrese, I know you're not a regular diver, but you designed the devices. Nobody knows them better. You up for this?" "Yes, sir." Calabrese's voice came through, steady despite the obvious fear. "I'll do it." 20 minutes later, all 3 divers were at depth, hanging in the water above the triangle of mines. Their lamps created a pool of light in the darkness, illuminating the German death trap. Up close, the configuration was even more sinister, the mines positioned so that any conventional clearance attempt would trigger all 3 simultaneously. "All right," Webb said, his voice calm in the way that only comes from absolute focus. "Ortiz, you take the northern mine. Calabrese, you've got the western one. I'll take the southern position. We place the devices on my mark, then I'll count down the activation. 3, 2, 1 sequence. Questions?" "Negative." "No questions." "Good. Remember, don't press the button until I give the word. Timing is everything." They moved into position, each diver approaching their assigned mine with exaggerated care. The trench was narrow, barely wide enough for 3 men in diving suits. Calabrese's airline snagged on a rock outcropping, and for a heart-stopping moment he had to stop and carefully work it free. On the surface, the entire crew watched the air bubbles rising from below. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the gentle slap of water against the pier and the mechanical wheeze of the air compressors. "Devices in position," Webb said. "I'm going to count to 3, then we activate simultaneously. Northern mine first, then western, then southern. 5-second intervals. Everybody tracking." "Tracking. Roger that. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." Ortiz pressed his button first. The 7 pulses transmitted through the mine casing, 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. The mechanical clunk of the tumbler releasing seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. Northern mine disarmed. 5 seconds. The water was so cold that Calabrese's hands were starting to go numb inside his gloves. His breath came in sharp, controlled bursts. Western mine activating now. He pressed the button. The pulses fired. 3 short. Normal. 2 long. Still normal. 1 short. The mine made a sound it wasn't supposed to make. Not the mechanical clunk of disarmament, but a high-pitched whine that rose in frequency like a tea kettle coming to boil. Inside the pressure housing, something had gone wrong. A corroded wire, a faulty contact, a design flaw they'd never encountered in 278 previous mines. The safety mechanism was failing. "Abort!" Calabrese shouted. "Mines activating. Get clear." But in a narrow trench at 65 feet, wearing 100 pounds of diving equipment, "get clear" was a suggestion more than a possibility. Webb grabbed Ortiz and shoved him toward the mouth of the trench. Calabrese tried to push off from the mine, but his airline was still snagged, and for 2 seconds, 2 eternal seconds, he fumbled with the caught hose while the whine grew louder. On the surface, Hartwell was already moving, shouting orders that nobody could really follow, because what do you do when a man is about to die and there's nothing you can do to stop it? Webb made a decision. Instead of fleeing, he swam back toward Calabrese, grabbed him, yanked the airline free with strength born of pure adrenaline, and then, with less than a second before the mine detonated, he wrapped both arms around Calabrese and turned his back to the explosive, shielding the other diver with his own body. The mine exploded, but not catastrophically. In that last half-second, some failing component inside the mine's fusing mechanism gave out completely. Instead of a full detonation, the mine produced what bomb disposal experts call a low-order failure, a partial explosion where only some of the hexenite ignited. It was still enough to kill a man at close range. But Webb's body absorbed most of the blast. The shock wave threw both divers out of the trench like rag dolls. Calabrese tumbled 20 feet through the water, his helmet ringing like a church bell, his vision going white. When it cleared, he was on his back, staring up at bubbles rising toward a surface he couldn't see. Ortiz grabbed him and started ascending. "I've got Calabrese. Somebody get Webb. Somebody get Webb." Reeves was already going down, his descent so fast it was almost a controlled fall. He found Webb 15 feet from the blast site, on his side, air bubbles leaking from his suit. The entire back of his diving dress was shredded, the canvas and rubber torn open by shrapnel. Blood clouded the water around him. "I've got him," Reeves said, his voice absolutely level despite the horror of what he was seeing. "Ascending now. Get medical on the pier. We need them now." The ascent was too fast, dangerous, likely to give both of them the bends, but the alternative was Webb bleeding out underwater. Reeves surfaced in under a minute, and hands reached down to haul them both up. They got Webb's helmet off. He was conscious, barely, his face gray with shock. The shrapnel had caught him across the back and shoulders. Dozens of small wounds, none immediately fatal but cumulatively catastrophic. He was losing blood fast. The corpsman worked with swift efficiency. Pressure bandages, morphine, saline. "We need to get him to a real hospital." "No. This is beyond field medicine." "There's a field hospital 3 miles inland," Hartwell said. "Get a jeep. Fast as you can drive." They loaded Webb onto a stretcher. Before they carried him away, his eyes found Hartwell. He tried to say something, but his voice was too weak. Hartwell leaned close. "Don't talk. Save your strength. Did Calabrese make it?" "He made it. You saved him." Webb managed something that might have been a smile. "Finish it, sir. Finish the harbor." "We will."